So I finished The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu, who was a Chinese author. And to cut right to the chase, the book's interesting. It's a fun read. I would not have read the book had I not known certain spoilers later on in the story that I thought were cool and interesting, and I wanted to see how the story justified or explained those spoilers. Um, I'm obviously gonna go through the book and ramble about various parts that I thought were interesting or points to kind of nitpick. But from a top-down view, the characters in the book are not really characters. I mean, some of them have personality enough that distinguishes them from other people, but at the end of the day, the characters really just exist to facilitate interesting events, interesting things happening, interesting developments in the plot, even though I think there isn't really much of a plot that goes on. Like, the plot from the reader's point of view makes sense, but the plot from the character's point of view has to be incredibly confusing, which is something that I kind of thought of as I was reading it, is what these characters are going through seems they can never see the forest from the trees, like they're so immersed in it. But in the end, they just like have this like ultra clarity where everything's revealed, and it's like, oh, it's kind of disappointing because that all happens off screen, and it would have been interesting to see the impact of those revelations, and instead it's just like, oh, let's drink some alcohol and go to a locust field. Great. Um, the prose in the book, it's okay. Um, in the beginning is when the book is the strongest, both in terms of what is being conveyed, like what we're talking about and how we're talking about it. There is a prose style, but about one third of the way through the book, there is really no more prose. It's just somebody writing down a series of things happening. There are various attempts at prose intermittently after that point, but they're never as strong. They don't feel like they're the writer's honest attempts at putting in a specific way of writing something. It feels like they're begrudgingly putting these things in. Whereas in the beginning, it feels like the author was quite inspired. And I'm going to explain why. So the beginning of the book is about the Cultural Revolution in China, where basically students, there's like no school for like 2 years or whatever, and a bunch of people are just like going hog wild to try to stamp out any sense of capitalism. And this is something that the author actually went through. His parents were in like a coal mine, like 5,000 or 5 kilometers away, and he was like being in another village somewhere else. I don't know who he was raised by. And so this is something that he experienced when he was a young lad. And it clearly had an impact on him. And that impact leads him to be able to write about the Cultural Revolution in a very interesting way. So he begins the first chapter with the story about this girl waving a flag on top of a building, and she gets shot and she's falling, and it's described in this really interesting way. And this is like one of the strongest prose moments in the book. The writer is really describing it in a really thematically tense way. It's really rich in detail, and this is a part of the book where I appreciate the detail and I appreciate the imaginativeness. I don't appreciate detail and imaginativeness when you're just describing like a physics paper, but to me that's fucking boring. But that's later on. So later on, we get introduced to our first main character, Yi Wenji. Turns out that girl who, well, let's tell the story in a different way. Yi Wenji is at a struggle session for her father, who is a physics professor, and he refuses to denounce theoretical physics because, according to the Cultural Revolution people, they believe that theoretical physics is a capitalist ploy to reintroduce religion into the world, because if the world was created by something and there was nothing beforehand or whatever, then there's room for a creator to have created the world. And if that's the case, then communism is mad because true communism is atheistic, because for a couple of reasons, but one of them being that Karl Marx believed that religion was a tool to suppress the fervor of the working classes, to still them from revolting against those who controlled the means of production. So, Yi Wenji's at this struggle session for her father. Her father's getting beat up by 13-year-old girls, I shit you not. And they're having this like debate back and forth. It's very interesting. And eventually her father gets killed, and oh no, she's not a teenager. She's like a post grad student, I think, at this point. And she gets sent away to like cut down trees in fucking like northern China or some shit. And her sister and her mom were both like, yeah, oh my god. Like, her mom was like, just wanted to say the right things to fit in with the right crowd, but her sister was like, yeah, cultural revolution, oh my god. Well, that girl that was in the first chapter who got shot and killed, that was 2 years after the struggle session with her father, so she died. She was dead. That was Yi Wenji's sister. So that was interesting. I thought that was a really cool, like, oh, I wonder if this character's gonna matter. And it's like, oh, she mattered to the main character, kind of, but we don't really ever get to meet her. Then Yi Wenji basically goes on a wacky and kooky trip where she badly politically navigates a bunch of situations, and then ends up working as like the lowest rung non-comrade employee at Red Coast Base, which is a astronomical observatory place with a satellite dish. And when she's there, she's thinking that the commissar likes her and the engineer hates her, and nobody's allowed to call her comrade because she has they all think that she's like not a political ally. Like, she's a member of one of the 5 black categories in China, which, like, the 5 black categories are like people who are right-leaning politically, people who are, was it like professors? I don't know, you can go Google it, but basically the color black and everything in the Cultural Revolution is like just bad. And there's like these 5 black categories of people who were like not allowed to basically have any power in China at the time. And that kind of comes up throughout, but it's more of a Cultural Revolution artifact and not really a major component of the story. It's just something that comes up a few times. Honestly, there's really nothing that's a major component of the story when it comes to the characters. There's just a few things that come up a few times. That's generally what all the characters are. Even the main character that's introduced later on, Wang Zhao, I can't really even begin to describe him as just like John Everyman, other than he's a little horny for every female character that's mildly attractive, but the story doesn't have anything to do with that. I think that's just the author jacking off. So yeah, Yi Wenji, she thinks that the commissar man running the base, who is more of a political-minded individual, likes her, and she thinks the engineer man doesn't like her, even though the engineer man is the one who orchestrated her working here instead of being perma-ultra slave forever. Well, it turns out eventually, oh my god, it was a huge Keikaku twist. The commissar actually hates her, and then the engineer man likes her. And in the context of the book, it makes sense, but when I'm saying it, it sounds goofy and stupid. So the engineer man was like really trying to get her to like be able to do more important things at the facility, because she is a post-grad student in physics. Like, she could help out with things more than just like sweeping cables and whatever the fuck they had her doing before this moment. So then after that, I'm telling the story chronologically, mind you. In the book, it's like jumping all over the place, okay? But chronologically, it makes a little bit more sense. It's a little more understandable. So then Yi Wenji, one day she realizes, or she notices that there's like a transmission from fucking space. And she's like, oh my god, aliens. And then she receives the message, and the message is like, do not come, do not respond. I am a dissident on this planet, and will come and invade you if you respond. Do not respond. So what does she do? Well, if you remember, her family's been destroyed by the Cultural Revolution. The only person in her family that she liked, her dad, was killed in front of her. You know, she's had a horrible life. and she's basically been like betrayed by every person that she's like come in contact with. Things have been bad. So naturally, she's like, please come to Earth. We cannot solve our problems. We need you aliens to come and fix our problems on Earth. Now, I don't think she believes that the aliens are going to come and fix anything. I think in her heart she believes she just wants to get revenge. She really does. And for a while later on in the book, she believes that the aliens are a force for potential good. You know, that they can maybe help change things on Earth for the better. But ultimately, she comes to the realization, as everyone does, that no, the aliens are just looking to invade. Because any culture that, once you know the alien culture, there's no other alternative for what the aliens would like to do. That's just how they have to be. So anyway, Yi Wenji sends the response message, and oh no. She thinks she clears everything up, but the next day we find out that the commissar receives every message that the computers in the base receive. So he knows that the aliens contacted them and that Yi Wenji responded. So Yi Wenji basically plots, she like fucks up one of the cables going up to the base because it's on like a clay mountain and they have to have the cables like over the clay because if it's in the clay the cables will dissolve. So they're over the clay, and then the commissar, this is the part where like this one personality trait is brought up seconds before the commissar does it just to justify the scene. So we're told immediately before this happens that the commissar was a leader by he played the role of a leader well and blah 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 blah, and so he's like, I'll volunteer to go do the dangerous thing. So he goes over the cliff on this like rope, and Yi Wenji's gonna like cut the rope and kill him. But then the engineer man shows up, and at this point, her and the engineer man are married. And then engineer man's like, I'm gonna go down there too and help out. And it's just like it's like a comedy. It's like, what the fuck? And she's like, shit, I gotta do it. She tried to get Engineer Man not to go down, but he does. And then she cuts the rope and kills her husband and the commissar because otherwise, if she didn't, then she was gonna be fucked. Like she probably would have been executed. Like after they got all the information from her, they would have killed her probably. Which I find interesting that she held on to her own life there, but she's fine with inviting aliens to come and kill everyone. So like it seems like she just wants to live. Like maybe there's a hope for a better world, but probably not. So basically she gets away with it. She reveals that she's pregnant like right after this. And then she raises the kid in like a village, and she kind of warms up to like maybe humanity doesn't deserve to die, but then like all the men in the village are like cheating on their wives and like hitting their wives, but they don't do anything bad to her because like she's very respected because she's educated. She educates all their kids so that their kids can take the entrance exam to the school so they can go to school. So they all love her. Nobody does anything bad to her. And that's basically her story in chronological order up until before the main character is introduced, Wang Zhao. So when Wang Zhao is introduced, he deals with nanomaterials, and he is one day randomly invited to this random military council where they're talking about this enemy who's like all over Earth, and it just makes no sense at all. Nobody explains anything. It's ridiculous. Then eventually he comes in contact with this person from the Frontiers of Science, which is an organization that is a total red herring in the book. But basically, he sees that she's playing this game called 3bodyproblem.com or whatever. So then he goes there, he gets a haptic full body suit, and he starts playing the game. And the game basically takes you through different civilizations eras on the alien planet, because the people who made the game, this is way future spoilers from later on, but yeah. So the people who made the game are part of like, they're a part of the Earth Trisolaran organization. And the people who made the game are like religious, and they use the game to invite people into their organization, and they want to test them. So they have to advance far enough in the VR game before they'll do like a meetup, and then they'll kind of like suss them out and be like, what do you think about aliens coming to Earth? And and being awesome, and then they're like, I don't think that's awesome. And so this happens to Wang Zhao, and then two people who don't like the idea, basically the two rational individuals, are like a CEO and a businessman, and then he's like, okay, well, you are no longer invited this session, and your accounts for Three Body will be destroyed. Goodbye. You leave now. Goodbye. And then it's like, what the fuck? It's very strange. So then they go to uh, like a meetup, and then it turns out that the leader of the Earth Trisolarian organization, obviously, who else is gonna be? Who is it gonna be? It's fucking Yuenji. It's the girl from the beginning, of course. There are some funny ass shit that happens in the VR game. One point, they make a 350 million, or no, 35 million Chinese soldier human computer by they're all raising white flags and black flags, and it's kind of funny because like this is the furthest any of the civilizations have ever gotten because they have like three suns and the suns keep like flying all over the place, and it like makes it very hard to have like a stable era where you can like prosper. And before this moment they thought that they were only two suns, but it's actually a big reveal that like, oh my god, there's three suns. And then that's when they realized like, oh, we don't need to try to figure out the like when it's going to be a stable era and chaotic era. We need to figure out how to get the fuck off this planet. So then all their future civilizations' main priority is scientific advancement to get off the planet and find a new home. And the Trisolarians are like, they can like dehydrate themselves, and then like, and when they have sex, they like, this is explained like in the last chapter, okay? But when they have sex, the man and woman like dissolve into each other and make a new person, and then that person divides. They divide into three people. It's really fun. It's basically like they meld into each other, and then they make two people who are melded people. But then there's or make they make one person, but then from the one person, 1/3 of the new person becomes another person, and then that person divides into five people, and then that's their kids. And then I think the original people just die. I don't even, it's very strange, but like they have all their memories or something, or like they have like there's like this like innate memory passing on kind of thing that exists, or something. It's very weird. I don't understand. It's a little boring though, the alien society. The one chapter we get on the alien society, it isn't very imaginative. It's basically just like Earth authoritarian fascism. It has propaganda. Like there's nothing special about the Trisolarian organization or Trisolarian people other than like their weird planet and their weird biology. But their culture just seems like Earth authoritarian fascism, but like kind of justified because they needed like culturally justify killing all the Earth people. It's kind of wacky. So yeah, the end of the book, it's like the main thing. This is interesting. There's interesting problems that are set up. They're just solved in kind of goofy ways, and it's like almost unbelievable. There's a lot of cool, interesting things that happen, though, mind you. It's not like I like knowing the twists. That made it worthwhile to read for me because there's so many more things that happen that it's like, what the fuck is this? Is ridiculous, and it's I gotta keep reading. Like, what the this is so silly. I wouldn't say it was stupid though, but the fleet is flying to Earth, and then the Trisolarians are like, the general's like, half our fleet's gonna get there, and by the time we get to Earth, Earth is gonna be so far advanced that we're gonna be at their total mercy. Like they're gonna kick our ass. So the scientist is like, oh, that's why we have been working on this thing, blah 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 blah, and basically they take a proton and they divide it into like two dimensions or some shit, and then they write a fucking etch-a-sketch computer on it, and then they fold it back up, and then they send it to Earth, and then that Sophon is gonna like fuck up human technology basically. But the trial runs of this, they actually fuck it up, and then one time when they unfold it, there's like 5 times they do this, but one of the times when they unfold it, it unfolds into like an eyeball, and then it turns into like multiple eyeballs, and then all the eyeballs come together. It's a big eyeball, and then the big eyeball turns into a parabolic mirror and starts blasting the planet with reflecting light from the sun. And then they nuke it and blow it up. It's the most ridiculous sequence of events I've ever read in a book. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then the leader of the Trisolarans is like, did we just kill an entire civilization? And then the scientist man is like, sir, we're killing entire microcosms or cosmoses every time we do particle accelerating research by smashing these things together. And then the leader, the princept he's called, is like, oh, excellent. Send that to the propaganda newspapers immediately. And then he's like, oh, why? And he's like, because we'll use that inevitability of destroying cosmos to justify killing all the humans. I was like, well, it was already the most ridiculous sequence of events, and then that's holy shit. Wow, amazing. I couldn't believe it. And yeah, then some other dumb shit happens at the end. There's like a part where a boat going through the Panama Canal gets like shaved in half by nanomaterial strings. And honestly, that's like a minor moment in the book. What the? I would love to see that in the movie. That sounds great. That would be like a whole 30-minute sequence that's like, it's like a chapter in the book, but it has to take up so much time. It takes up so much time. It's ridiculous. Oh, but yeah, at the end of the book, what is the state of everything? So the Trisolarans are coming to Earth. Trisolaris is going to be eaten by the sun eventually. The fleet is on its way to Earth. There are sophons on the Earth, which are basically proton particles that are just fucking up Earth. Accelerator, like the large hadron collider or hard-on collider, if you're a funny guy like me. And basically, it's like fucking up like particle research on Earth, so they can't figure out particles. But the Trisolarans are still afraid of like nanomaterial, and that's what the main character was researching. There are a few threads left undone, like the main character was working on his nanomaterial stuff, but then he saw a countdown timer on his eyes, and then he stopped, and the countdown timer stopped. But then, like, presumably they started researching it again, but then the countdown timer never came back, so like he can continue doing the research. Yeah, but basically, humanity seems like they're in for a rude awakening because culturally they're about to all have revealed that like aliens are coming to attack. We have like 450 years to prepare ourselves. What are we gonna do? And the main character and then some other random character who's barely in the book are like getting drunk and they're like, oh, it's the end of the world. Oh, fuck it, you know. And then the officer man, police cop guy who's like in the book a lot, but he just shows up to be important for the plot. He's like, what are you two idiots doing? And then they go look at locusts and he's like, you see those locusts? Humans have been trying to kill bugs forever. We haven't been able to kill them. You think those Trisolarans are going to be able to kill us? And then they're like, oh my god, that's right. We're so much more technically advanced than bugs, but we can't kill bugs. We got a lot of work to do. And then they're re-inspired to like, I guess, live the rest of their lives to try to fight the Trisolarans or whatever. And that's kind of where the book caps off. Oh yeah, and then Yi Wenji revisits Red Coast Base as like a grandma, and she goes to where she killed her husband and the commissar, and she's just like, oh, you know, I came up here to have a sunset for myself and a sunset for humanity. And then that's like the final line in the book. I thought she might have killed herself there. I thought that would have been a good arc for her character, which sounds weird to say that a character should have killed themselves, but I mean, if anyone's going to kill themselves, it's probably going to be the person who betrayed humanity. You know, right? But I think it would be because for her whole life, she's kind of been a hypocrite. Like, she didn't betray her father. She held strong to her beliefs and morals for most of her life up until she killed her husband and the commissar. Up until that point, she always like adhered to the truth and just tried to be a good person. But then after that point, she's kind of just was a lie. Like she wasn't really the leader of the Earth Tricellular organization. She was like just the figurehead. And she was just kind of feeding a lot of lies to people about the organization and things like that. So like the like the moral superiority that she had at the beginning of the book that she could fall back on is like, well, at least I'm still a good person, no longer exists. Like she became a bad person eventually. She became bad from the bad world essentially. So when there was times where she could end her life but she didn't, now it seems like a time where she absolutely should, because she has nothing, no bullshit anymore. Like everyone knows what she did. She knows what she did. She knows the full truth of how bad things are going to be now because they have all the Earth Trisolarian communication that's been hidden from them. And you would think that like, oh, I can't live with what I've done. But instead, she still seems kind of like scornful towards the Earth, I guess. I don't know. I hope her character kind of shows up in the later books maybe, because there isn't really a lot of character depth in the books, and if there is going to be any of them, I would like to have some kind of like resolution, because like Wang Miao is not a character. He's John Everyman who just needs to run around for the plot to make him do things. And Yi Wenji is close to a character. She's the one who we get the most emotional depth from, and she does the most interesting things. It's just that now she's like an old lady, so what is she gonna do? Like, but every time she's in the book, up until the reveal that she's like the fake leader of the Earth Tricellular organization, her character, she has like a screen presence, I would say, almost. Whereas Wang Miao is like, for some reason the book calls him Wang Zhao and Wang Miao. I have no idea. I do not know Chinese. I have no idea why they do that. But like anytime the main character Wang Miao is on the screen, he's just like he's just like straightforward logic man who's just like generally rational, except for the parts when there's a female character being introduced, and then he immediately is like, oh, she is so fucking hot, oh my god. I mean, that's not how it's written, but it's like it's horny. He doesn't pay attention to the men, but if there's a woman, he's sexually sizing up every woman that's introduced. Wang Zhao sexually sizes up. It gets to the point where it's like, it's not the character doing this. This is just the author. The author is bored and horny, and he's like, oh, and then the tight dress of the fucking UN security femoid fucking gave me a fucking boner. Like, it's a little ridiculous. It borders on Stranger into Strangeland in terms of the blatant sexism at hand, in terms of the mind of the author. But I mean, I don't really care. It's just kind of funny to be like, whoa, the author is fucking crazy and horny. Oh, but the book's still a fun read, and if you can overlook that, I think it's worth reading. It's definitely imaginative and has a lot of interesting sci-fi elements. And the prose is good in the beginning. It introduced me to some things I didn't know about before with the Cultural Revolution. So I think it's worth reading for sure. I wouldn't say it's that good of a book, though. I mean, it's a translation, so yeah, but the characters are not people. They don't exist as people. The main character has a wife and son who are never even given names. It's actually hilarious. Every time that he interacts with them, I was actually going to laugh, because there's like one part of one chapter where he's interacting with his wife, and it just keeps calling it like Wang's wife or whatever. And it's like, why don't you just give her a name, like, so that they can interact? So he can be like, oh, Susie, do this thing or whatever. I mean, obviously her name's not going to be fucking Susie, but like, it's such a stilted writing style when you don't give the character a name. So the main character is interacting with his wife, and it's just like, wife, go do this. Or then he told his wife to. It's so awkward. Like, just have him be a bachelor. Why is he married? Don't have the character have family relations in the book if you're not going to make those relations better. What the fuck? But really, that's all I have to say. So, yeah, blow me.